Both Jimmy and I come out of long careers with the state police, going back 40 years myself of working with juvenile services in a law enforcement capacity, and we've always had a good relationship with the men and women who work out of juvenile services. Now, do we agree with all the policies that come out of that department? No, and exacerbated by the legislative changes of a couple of years ago, have made dealing with the juvenile crime issue very frustrating. But certainly with Secretary Ciraldi, we dealt with a very liberal, if you will, view of accountability for juvenile, particularly repeat juvenile criminal offenders.
I think what we've missed, Mackenzie, is the boots on the ground DJS worker that would show up and actually work with law enforcement when they took a juvenile into custody or had an issue with a particular juvenile. That seemed non-existent. Everything was done by a phone call and triage from a distance, and the majority of the time they were just saying send them home to a parent or to a guardian. And that's what I think prior to Ciraldi, and as Jeff would say, we were both troopers for a lot of years. As a state trooper working the road, it was always a DJS agent that would come out and interview the individual, work with parents, and properly place someone. I don't remember the last time that took place.
Sheriff Gahler, you're shaking your head yes. Do you agree?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, he's spot on, and it is frustrating.
When it comes to the boots on the ground, as you said, Sheriff DeWees, why is that important to work with and have the in-person communication? How is it different to make those decisions on the ground versus virtually or over the phone?
Jeff just said, I mean, they would hear an individual say, I'm going to go back out and steal more cars.
And so, you don't hear that over the phone?
I mean, you can, but I don't believe they actually interview the individual over the phone. I mean, and I'm not talking about every single case where we have contact with someone, but when it's violent, when it's someone that's stealing cars, it's a repeat offender, those sort of folks, they need to come out and lay eyes on them, talk to them, talk to parents, have parents come in. Those are things that took place for years when I was a law enforcement officer actually out there doing it. I don't see that happening at all. So a lot can be accomplished if they actually come out of their houses and show up at a scene.
A couple of years ago when the laws first changed, did you immediately see a change, or what was that like?
We knew that this was going to be tragic. We knew, and besides the 2022 juvenile justice reform, at the same time Vincent Ciraldi shows up. It was the perfect storm for just tragedy. It really was. We told Annapolis when it was time to confirm Vincent Ciraldi that this was not going to go well. They should have listened to the experts, the people that were actually out there doing it day in and day out, but they didn't.
Why don't you think that they listened?
Well, I don't know. This is Annapolis. We just know from 40 years of law enforcement experience what the result is going to be of telling juvenile offenders there's no accountability. And that's what much of the juvenile reform legislation did 2 years ago, and exacerbated by Ciraldi coming in as the secretary with very lenient leanings on no accountability.
Critics will say that when people are calling for more accountability, that just means people want to see kids in jail. Is that true?
No, I don't think we do. We don't want to see them in jail. I mean, there's people that, quite honestly, there are juveniles that are extreme violent offenders that need to sit in jail. There's no arguing that. But I think that a system that holds individuals accountable is a system that we're looking for. But those are words we never hear, accountability. You're hearing them now, but those are things that we never hear. But I don't think we want to sell everybody down the river when it comes to juveniles, but there are people that need to be held accountable, and they're not.
I agree 100%. Certainly not at all. We don't want to see juveniles in jail. We want to see them put on a path to not continuing to offend. If there's some degree of intervention and accountability, maybe we don't see them as an adult. Instead of just condoning, by not taking some sort of accountability, condoning the action, the activity of committing crimes in our communities.
The quarterly monitoring reports show that the facilities are understaffed and the morale inside, it's drastically low, and the assaults continue to rise. There's contraband found inside. What does DJS need to do to fix that in order to make sure that these kids are on the right path? If they're in these facilities, how can they be rehabilitated if that's the environment that they're in?
Well, that's interesting, because if you look at Vincent Ciraldi's track record, New York, Washington, the same thing happened in those institutions that he was over, whether it was a DJS system in Washington, Rikers in New York. They had low morale. Officers were being assaulted regularly. His policies in those institutions mirrored the policies outside of the institution, and that's why there were issues inside of the jails and the facilities. And again, it is accountability for the DJS secretary, and it is accountability for the individuals that are in those facilities. It's funding it appropriately. It's being transparent with what is exactly going on in those facilities.
If the staff isn't doing the job, I can tell you, I have an office of almost 700 people. I fired my share of them. It has to be, just like we're saying, there needs to be accountability for the juvenile offenders. There needs to be accountability for the employees, the secretary, straight on down to the employees. If they're not up to doing their job honestly and with integrity, and providing a service for those offenders who come into their care or into their watch, then move them on. Separate them. And we both work in state government. You can fire state employees if that is where your problem lies.
He was never transparent about anything that took place there. He was hiding behind statistics, hiding behind incidents.
So do you believe all of the data coming from the Department of Juvenile Services when it comes to juvenile crime?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I think you and I have talked about this before. So they changed Annapolis changed the age at which a juvenile is presumed capable of committing a crime, the infancy age, from 8 to 13 or under the age of 13. It's like me changing the speed limit on a highway from 55 to 100 and saying I solved the speeding problem on the interstate highway.
It's a great analogy.
And I've watched you try to get numbers from them that made sense, and I tried to get numbers from them that made sense to give to you so that we could both make sense of it, and none of us could. So not only do I not trust it, I'm sure Sheriff Gahler doesn't. I'm sure the delegates, the senators, and really anybody that tried to gather data simply don't trust it.
Yeah, I would agree with him 100% that I don't know that you can always look at a number 2 different ways and sell it a certain way to your benefit.
With the new acting secretary in place, Betsy Fox Tolentino, are you hopeful that there will be a new chapter for DJS?
Well, certainly this change was much needed, but if the same policies remain in place and the same practices remain in place, then we're no better off. There's a lot of problems, and you listed off some, just spoke about it. There's a lot of problems. You're not going to fix them overnight, but there are things that can be done quickly, as we talked about. Getting people out to the scene, getting people to talk to these offenders and really add some level of accountability. It can't be a blank check that when you interact with police, when you're picked up for a crime, particularly a violent crime or being a repeat juvenile offender, that the reward is that you are released to go home with perhaps a parent or a guardian who hasn't been doing a good job to start with.
So Jeff and I met the new acting secretary last week on a call with the governor. And I invited her to the Sheriff's Association meeting. We meet monthly, all the sheriffs do throughout the state. State's attorneys do, the chiefs do, and those are where you build relationships. It's not about when something happens for me to pick up the phone and call the new acting secretary. My fear is that there was so much screwed up under Schiraldi, it's going to take her years to unscrew what he screwed up. I don't know that she'll have enough time to fix the mess that he made. It's going to take legislation, it's going to take money, it's going to take time, it's going to take an awful lot. I almost feel sorry for her. She's certainly not coming in after Brooks Robinson at third base, so she should come out swinging pretty easily, but she's got a monumental task in front of her.
What should be her number 1 priority?
Work with us, give us a seat at the table, give law enforcement a seat at the table.
If there were to be a policy change that she implemented on day 1 or in this first couple of weeks, what would make your jobs easier, or do you believe would impact public safety?
We've talked about this at our weekly crime meetings. I know our commanders would like to see some sort of a matrix or some sort of accountability matrix or something that we could look at to know that if we pick up an individual, on a repeat offense, second time they've been arrested for stealing cars, or the third time they've been arrested for stealing cars, that juvenile services is not just going to arbitrarily say, let them go. That there is some sort of process. Maybe it's release, ankle monitor, incarceration.
Was that escalation policy or that plan, was that not outlined for you before?
There's nothing like that exists.
We would like to see that. I think, and Jeff's right. I think the state's attorneys, when you town hall them, they'll tell you the same thing. There's crimes that are being committed that they have no clue of, serious crimes, waivable crimes, that DJS is simply stepping in and making the decision to either release or charge locally within their own system. So a matrix would be extraordinarily helpful so that we understand, so that there's no question of what should be an individual should be in intake for.
What's the lasting effect of Vincent Schiraldi's tenure leading DJS?
His lasting effect or the legacy? I think the lasting effect can be changed, with all the right steps by the new secretary, should she be confirmed. I think the legacy can move on, or the effects can be bettered for the community that we served, improved. But I think the legacy is, just like he had in his other places, it's a legacy of a lack of success or failure, to put it more harshly.
I think of a legacy as something positive. Effect is what I believe that he had on the DJS system, and it was a negative effect. And I like I said earlier, I think that the new acting secretary, and if she's confirmed as secretary, has just a monumental task on her hands. She can't be worse than him.
I am reassured to some degree that, again, like Jimmy just said, the governor made the right call. Maybe took too long to make it, but he finally made the right call and made the change, and he has put knowing the issues, he has put his trust in the acting secretary.
Do you know what the tipping point was for the governor to make the decision?
I do not.
I think that this organization did a really good job of highlighting juvenile crime and the deficiencies within the DJS system.
What organization?
FOX45. And I think that the other news outlets that are dominant in this region did a poor job and were complicit in how they reported on juvenile crime.
Are the changes that lawmakers made to the juvenile justice laws, are they enough? Do they go far enough? What more do you want to see them take?
I think they went in the wrong direction. I've been very critical of the Juvenile Interrogation Act related to the shooting at the Joppatown High School we had on the 4th day of school this year in Harford County. I think that they went too far. And in that case, a 16-year-old made a very adult decision, made a decision to take a gun, to obtain a gun, to put it in a backpack, to carry it to school that day, had the intent of taking another individual's life. He just was convicted as such. But we weren't allowed to talk to that individual. Even after advising him of his rights, had he waived his rights, he wouldn't be allowed to talk to us without consulting an attorney because of the law that Maryland changed. And as a result, we still have a handgun from that shooting unaccounted for.
I don't think either of us or all the sheriffs or law enforcement throughout the state are opposed to reform within the juvenile justice system. And I agree with Jeff. They went too far on a number of the things that they implemented in 2022. But what they haven't done is put the money into caseworkers that can go out and monitor, track. You and I have talked about this till we're blue in the face with GPS monitoring, holding individuals accountable. I don't see any of that. I think that under Schiraldi, the ankle monitor was just something where he could say, I'm doing it. But he wasn't doing it well at all, and it does work.
And neither one of us are advocating for, we want to see incarceration. We're talking about a very small percentage, just like in the adult population. It's a very small percentage of those people who commit the majority of the crime in our communities. And it's a very small percentage of the underage people who are committing these crimes. And within that percentage, it's a very small percentage who are repeat serious violent offenders. There needs just to be an accountability. I'm not saying a lifetime, and I don't think he is a lifetime behind bars, but the intervention of the criminal justice system, the juvenile criminal justice system, early can maybe put these people on a path, these young people on a path to a better adult life. And it seems to be juvenile services, particularly under Secretary Schiraldi, moved in the direction of making sure that accountability did not happen.
The problem is that this former secretary decided what stayed in the DJS system, and they were lost in that system. And nobody really had an understanding of why they stayed there and they weren't waived to adult status. And you said something earlier about Annapolis. That first and foremost, this new secretary, the acting secretary, needs to be confirmed by the Senate. And the Senate, I've watched your reporting on this, and I've actually watched his Senate confirmation, Schiraldi's Senate confirmation. Not one of those senators was comfortable with confirming him. They all knew that he was a problem, that this was going to be a problem. But none of them had, to me, the courage to step up and say, I'm not confirming you, you're not the right person for this job. They all knew that we would be here today. And so I would encourage them to ask the questions of the acting secretary, and then when they're done asking those questions, put legislation into effect to hold her accountable with real numbers, real actionable data that she can come back on a regular basis and report to them to see how the DJS system is doing by and large, whether it's in facilities, whether it's with law enforcement, whether it's real data that she can explain where those individuals have been tracked and how they're doing in the system. They didn't do that. They talked all of that, but they didn't do that at all, and that's why we're where we're at today.
I fear every 90-day session because, again, the bulk of the legislative body in Maryland doesn't think about our community members, our law-abiding citizens first and foremost. We will both be in Annapolis next year doing our best to fight off the bad legislation and support good legislation, but you know, when you think they can make it better, sadly it usually comes out worse. But we'll be down there fighting the fight.
Yeah, this is a great example for lawmakers to listen to the experts.